Okay, folks, welcome back to Shadowlands. So I wanted to go over the Soulbinds that I use for Fire Mage. I'm never sure how to cover Soulbinds since they have a effect, albeit a minor one. So I decided just to do it as its own little separate thing. So, uh, Theotar, the Mad Duke, is the soulbind that I use for fire, as you see. And this might be of the covenants of the soulbinds that I have seen and played with. Um, and I think I've seen, at least seen all 4 covenants, all 3 soulbinds for each one. Um, I have played with some more than others depending on the character. This is one of my favorites, if not my favorite one, because of some of the effects that he has. I had said back in Battle for Azeroth that if you got the crown from Opulence in the Battle for Danzalar raid, you could get an Azerite trait that would while you were in combat, randomly summon um, Bunzawi. And then you'd have to run to him and you'd get a buff. And if you didn't run to him, you either wouldn't get the buff or you'd lose a stack of the buff. And it was just kind of a um, fun thing to do in combat, at least if you were a DPS class, because you tend to just be running through your rotation. So moving to one place or another to get a buff, it was kind of fun, especially if you were doing something, like I said, DPS is kind of tedious. I was doing a lot on Mechagon on my hunter who got the crown. So doing the same thing over and over again, trying to get something to drop. It was just kind of a fun little added thing to do. You would always have to run to one place or another. It wasn't just stand in one place and run through your rotation. And this is very much um, somewhat the same way. Um, the first one mainly is Soothing Shade, which will summon 2. I don't know if they're supposed to be goblins. 2 little goblin-like characters, and they will be stacked on top of each other, holding a paracel. And as long as you stand within the shade of that paracel, you will gain mastery. So it's good for 2 reasons. One, it's kind of an AoE effect-ish sort of thing. There is a downside if you're in a high movement fight. It doesn't move with you. It just randomly procs somewhere, and you have to, as I said, stand in the shade. You don't have to stand like right in the center of it, just as long as you are within, within range of it. You can tell if you're getting the buff or not. It'll put a little buff up with the others you have. The other thing is its mastery, which came to be quite valuable for Fire Mage, as you can imagine. Fire Mage's mastery is Ignite. So every time you use a spell and it applies Ignite, it stacks and builds up. So having that extra mastery really helped. And it's just kind of a fun thing to do. You have to run somewhere and stand in something to get a buff and do all this other stuff. And I was doing a lot of dungeons and mythic dungeons and just kind of world, covenant things, getting the transmog set. So there really wasn't a lot of movement per se. I could kind of go and stand wherever. It is unfortunate if it procs and you're moving on to the next mob or the next boss or something like that. It's not a perfect ability. It only lasts 12 seconds though, and as far as I can tell, it doesn't have any kind of internal cooldown. You won't get this every time, but you will get it frequently enough to make a difference. The other thing was it's always tea time, which basically, in addition to what Soothing Shade does, it says, in addition to what Soothing Shade does, it will also heal you um, for. It will heal you and reduce damage taken while you are standing in your Soothing Shade. Now, it says that the two little dudes that spawn with it will offer you a cup of tea. It's just a buff. You don't have to do anything. It's not like... I was thinking it was kind of like Lightwell. Reading it, it's one of those things where reading it and interpreting it and what it actually does are all different things. It's not like that. You don't have to click anything. You don't have to do anything else. As long as you stand within the shade, it will heal you and reduce damage taken, which is actually, again, for a mage, that's something that I tend to struggle with, is self-healing. The only self-heal a mage has, basically, is Ice Block. And if you don't have anything that allows Ice Block to heal you, it's just reducing damage. You're not actually doing much of anything. And then the other thing is party favors. If you visit Theotar in Sinfall, you can obtain the Mad Duke's Tea, which will increase your haste, versatility, critical strike, or intellect for 4 hours. I have not done this yet, mostly because I keep forgetting, and mostly because I haven't been doing much on this character as of late. So I haven't had a need to have any kind of extra buffs or anything like that. But it's still one of the better end Soulbind effects that I have seen. As for the actual sockets, for Mage it was a bit weird because they really went... they really were subdivided quite adamantly. All the Frost ones worked for Frost Mage, whether it was an ability you had on all three specs or not. All the Fire worked on Fire. All of the Arcane worked on Arcane. There was very little overlap with anything, which is different than what I've seen. Usually it's been signature abilities, which makes sense. It would enhance or modify what a signature ability did on a spec, which on my monk was probably where I have the most experience besides my mage, and it kind of made sense because all three specs are different. One's tanking, one's DPS, and one's healing. Here, where all three specs are DPS, doesn't seem to make as much sense. It seems like it's hindering you more than it's helping. You do have things like Cryo Freeze, which will allow your Ice Block to heal you. I believe this was a glyph at some point, if I remember correctly, or it was an Azurite trait. There was something else in the game that allowed your Ice Block to do this. We've kind of gotten to that point of just carrying effects over from one system to the other, from expansion to expansion. And Winter's Protection, cooldown on Ice Block is reduced. There were a lot, though, that I was interested in getting, that were specific for Frost, even though I had the abilities as Fire or Arcane. And I only generally play Fire or Arcane on this character. I've played so much Frost back in the day when I first started a mage, and it's kind of the default spec to go to for a lot of things. So didn't really play with Fire much. Arcane was a bit of a disaster depending on which expansion you started playing. Fire could also be added to that category. Again, depending on which expansion / patch you played, depending on which version of Combustion you started playing with. So it wasn't it wasn't great, wasn't good, wasn't bad. It felt like I was limited in the choices I have. Um, you do get, your condensed atmosphere, um, different, different. I'm looking to see. I think these are all, flow of time. Blink is reduced. That's an ability you have on everything. Your covenant specific abilities. That was probably my only complaint was it seemed like they were a lot more, um, as I said, a lot more separated by spec um, than a lot of the other abilities. Even changing classes, even on my monk, as I said, would probably be the next class I have the most experience playing with the conduits with. Even though all three specs do something different, there were conduits that you could use from one to the other. Um, Whether it increased your self heal or your touch of death or something. I mean, it had some sort of benefit for all three specs, even though they were doing completely different roles in practice. And here, you're doing the exact same thing. You think it would be fairly simple to put in some class-specific ones and some general ones, and you think Mage would be a class that would be somewhat overpowered. Maybe that was something taken into consideration. So they kind of nerfed it before they did anything else. With Blizzard, who knows? Um, but that's why I don't have that many. I kind of was a little more selective on what I went after. So, the conduits I am using, Cryo Freeze, Master Flame, Diverted Energy, Winter's Protection, Controlled Destruction, and Flow of Time. So, and the other thing is, without having kind of more options, I only have 2 finesse. You kind of have to choose, what really want. It kind of limits your options as far as what you can take down the tree for your Soulbind as well. So it was a bit of a weird, at times it was a bit of a weird experience. I also don't know that I got as many. A lot of them are epic, so I'm sure I did, but it doesn't seem like I got as many from mythic dungeons and things like that as I did on my monk for whatever reason. My monk seemed to have no problem at all. I made it a point of going out and doing world quests and everything else, and then as I did mythics and I think mostly mythics. I think I did some time walking, different things like that, but mostly mythics were where they were dropping. Then occasionally I'd look for world quests for if there was one that would benefit an ability I was using as Brewmaster, or help in some way, since it was kind of a new endeavor there at the beginning of Shadowlands. Other than that, like I said, this worked perfectly fine. This was actually fun. It actually interacted with your character a little more than the others do. You honestly kind of forget it on a lot of characters unless it does something while you're in combat, or unless it somehow alters your ability, or something. You kind of just forget it until you actually get a socket or something, and then you go back and look, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm missing things. I need to activate a bunch of these and do something, or go farm some sockets or something. Again, kind of a weird system to have. I kind of like the fact that it's just a minor thing that you can or cannot put effort into. You don't really have to work towards it. You can do world quests. You don't have to, as long as you do dungeons, raids. I don't know how much drops from PvP. I've done a little bit of PvP. There's not really anything. PvP is not specific to Shadowlands, like dungeons and raids are. So what drops is more general. As long as you're doing something, though, that's Shadowlands related, you'll get um, conduits. That's not an issue. So I kind of like that fact that it's kind of a minor thing that you don't have to go out of your way to do. It's just something that's kind of there. Um, unlike the unlike the Heart of Azeroth, where you kind of had to go out and make an effort to farm all the different you know effects that you could use with that, which might have been a quick thing, might have been a chance of luck that something dropped, might have been something you had to do over several days, whatever the case. At least it told you. That was the one thing that I did like, was at least it showed you everything you could get and how to get it. So if you were wanting to work towards something specific, you could. You kind of have to go through and look at all the dungeons and look at all the raids and everything and just watch your world quest. The nice thing with world quest is different ones will drop the same conduit. So if there is a world quest you don't like, it's not like that's the only one that will drop that conduit. You can wait and eventually another world quest will drop it. I don't know that there's ever two up at the same time that drop the same one. But you usually don't have to wait too long if you keep an eye out. Usually over a day or two, maybe three, um, depending on how much you wanted any given socket. The world quests are fairly low level, though they will be usually a rare. Occasionally they will be, or a rare. Occasionally they will be an epic, but usually they will be rare. So that is the only kind of downfall. You're basically just getting the effect. You kind of need to buff it from there and hope you get an upgrade, which usually requires doing something else like a dungeon or raid. So, yeah. So there you go, folks. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope that was helpful for you. And thank you for watching.